recruiters are trying to match talent with jobs, they're matching based on the information that they can access, which is where you've worked and where you went to school. 80% of my story is not on my resume or on my LinkedIn profile. Most companies in most places don't do a good job of hiring the right person for the right job. These are two indications. So the first is that it takes them a long time to find someone that meets their criteria. Even after they find it, it was probably not the right hire, not the right fit. So there's a problem here in this marketplace, which is a market that's not very efficient. It's very hard for anyone to find the right person for the right job.
Today we have the pleasure to have Filipe on the podcast, and he's the co-founder of Talent Protocol. And while I was prepping for the interview, I looked at your talent profile, and I saw that you have Crypto Nomads Club. That you're based, you're a member of the Crypto Nomads Club. You have forecaster. You have over 100 transactions of only and these are one of the main indicators that you're essentially a Web3 native, apart from running a Web3 company, of course. But could you tell me a bit more about you and who you are and how did you join the Web3 ecosystem?
Sure. So I'll try to give you the short version. But since you brought up my talent passport, I think I can kind of connect the two. So my journey has a lot of different things. On one hand, I have kind of the traditional path of being like a computer science degree consultancy, and etc. But I have an entire kind of alternative path of like just being a DJ and performing as a DJ in a lot of countries and festivals and clubs. Doing like I did a 3-month agency safari where I visited agencies all across the world. I'm into street photography and did a bunch of side projects. And these are all including kind of being sponsored by Nike as a DJ and appearing in a Nike ad with Ronaldo one time. So there's a big story that goes way beyond kind of my traditional kind of professional path. So if you looked at my traditional resume or LinkedIn profile, you would just see like the tip of the iceberg. You wouldn't see the rest of the other 80%, which I can argue that is the most interesting part of my journey so far, not what you see in my resume. And that's part of the motivation for us to start building Talent Protocol. So how can we tell the story? How can we show the real kind of potential and capabilities of one person way beyond what you see on a resume? And then we kind of realize that blockchain has the right features and is the right technology kind of to build this new type of resume. And this journey started in early 2021, so 3.5 years ago. It was interesting because although and that's something that likes to make things and build things, and with a technical background, I was already more or less into crypto for a while, but it was once we had this idea, okay, this is what we really want to build, something that can reveal and show someone's true potential, and understanding that blockchain was actually the right tool to build this idea. This is where me and kind of my co-founders went all in Web3. But the interesting part is that we had an idea and a problem to solve, and then we realized that crypto and blockchain was actually the best solution to execute it, and that's why we decided to jump in. And whereas for some people it happens the other way around, so they just like Web3 and then they immerse themselves in the tech, and then they go and try to find a problem to solve and something to build because they just like the technology and they like the community. I mean, I'm not saying one approach is better than the other, but just highlighting that how mine started. And then after 2021. So in the past 3.5 years, it's been a roller coaster, as you can imagine. It's already a roller coaster for any just normal Web3 user, but as a founder, even more. So we started in a bull market. We were lucky enough to be able to gather early support both from community members and investors during that bull market, which allowed us to keep building during the bear market and still be uh, alive and healthy as a product and business today. And of course, during these 3.5 years, a lot has changed. We learned a lot. We pivoted here and there, but I think the core mission is still the same, which is to to give much more visibility and recognition to the people that really have capabilities and talent and are not often recognized and valued in the current systems that we have.
Mm. Yeah, you touched upon some very important points, and now we need to dig a bit deeper in every single one of them. But while I was prepping for the interview, I dedicated some time to read your white paper and extracted some data from there. So you were essentially arguing that employee disengagement cost the world around 9 trillion in lost productivity, but also a very important metric that I was really interested in was the time to fill a certain position, and it normally takes around 62 days, according to the research that you quoted in your white paper. And I think these two particular metrics are very interesting because they're essentially outlining the bigger problem of companies are A, losing money, and B, they take almost 2 months to fill every certain position. So how do you guys solve that problem? Because you obviously provide credentials, but actually my first question probably should be, could you tell me a bit more about what you do and the credentials that you provide, but also how do you solve that problem of providing the high quality talent for shorter time than any recruiter could do it?
Yeah, so I think starting from the problem is easier, and I think the two stats that you pointed out are two signs of the underlying problem, which is uh, most companies in most places don't do a good job of hiring the right person for the right job. And of course, these are two indications. So the first is that it takes them a long time to find someone that meets their criteria, and even after they find it, as you can see from that employee disengagement metric, it was probably not the right hire, not the right fit. So there's a problem here in this marketplace, which is a market that's not very efficient. It's very hard for anyone to find the right person for the right job, and this is even more. Uh, I would say even more interesting that this is happening now, because now, I mean, with remote work and we kind of a much more global um, work marketplace, it should be easier. It should be easier for you to find with kind of the a pool of talent, which is the entire world. It should be easier for you to find the right person, but it isn't. And I think what we believe is that, and this is a problem that's been going on for years or even decades, and it's a industry or a market that still works basically the same way as it worked decades ago. So it's still probably the most effective hiring technique that we still have is referrals. Is you asking the people that you trust who they trust for this job, and of course that limits the your talent pool by a lot, because it's basically only the people that you know. Um, just to say that this is a very complicated problem that a lot of people have been trying to solve for a lot of years without much success. Why is our approach different? First of all, I think we believe that the underlying problem is not in the matching, is not so much, okay, the search, how you search, and kind of the search engine, or like the matching engine, that it's wrong. It's the underlying problem is there is no data. So like I mentioned about the resume and my own journey, that 80% of my story is not on my resume or on my LinkedIn profile. This is, I think, what's the main issue is, because when recruiters are trying to match talent with jobs, they're matching based on the information that they can access, which is basically where you've worked and where you went to school. So based on these two data points, we make a decision on who to hire. Of course, this is a simplification and generalization, but I think that's the main idea. So what we believe is that in order to solve this bigger problem, what we need to fix is at this kind of data level. So how can we make sure there's much more data available for each person that allows us to get to know them much better, and allows us to do much better matchmaking between opportunities and talent, because there's so much more data. And I think this is where blockchain comes in for several reasons. First of all, it's because the way it works, it's already kind of recording and storing a lot of information, and it's storing information in an open and accessible way, which is, I think that's what the kind of the problem that comes next is that, I mean, there's a lot of information about me already. There's information on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, but all of the information that I'm putting and creating online is kind of closed in like this walled gardens, and it's owned by these different companies, which of course they will not share because their business model is selling that data. So although I'm already living my life online and having and a lot of data about me is online, all of that is kind of separated from each other and owned by other people. So what blockchain allows is that making all this kind of reputation data but much more open and accessible. That's one. And the second one is also about tokens and how we can play with incentives to create a way, or to incentivize people to actually reveal more of their data. So for example, in the referrals
Sorry,
example,
I'm
that's
very sorry to interrupt on that point.
no
We'll
worries.
definitely get to tokens and referrals, and I would love to
Okay.
talk about it.
No,
But
no.
I just want to throw
Feel free
something in.
to interrupt, because I otherwise I'll go on.
No, no, no. You're making some very valuable points, but I want to stay on the issue for a bit longer and on the underlying problem. And in a previous interview with you, I might be wrong and you might have changed your opinion, but you were essentially saying that you're not necessarily out there to replace LinkedIn. You want to work collaboratively with them. So is this still the case? And could you elaborate on this? Because I was looking at some data, and approximately 75% of the people that are currently looking for a job use LinkedIn, but more importantly, close to 90% of the recruiters are using LinkedIn to find new employees for companies. And that's data from Business of Apps. They done this research. So could you just tell me where do you fit within the existing structure? Because I was hoping that one day you would essentially replace LinkedIn because you provide data that's not only um, reliable, but you can easily verify. And that's a lot more important because I can put anything on my LinkedIn. And I remember we were just making these jokes when we were students, like you could potentially lie on your CV, like what's stopping you from doing that? And especially comparatively early in your career, you're incentivized to do it because everyone's asking for experience. So how do you guys resolve that problem? But also, where do you fit within the existing stack?
As I see it, LinkedIn is similar to a phone book. A phone book, in the sense as, is the place where you can find anyone, any employer or any talent. So if you want to look for someone and to have some basic initial information about someone, you know that that's where you go, and that there you'll more certainly find that person. Um, and this, of course, with all the being a phone book and all the network effects involved, it's going to take a long time for LinkedIn to be replaced by something else. And what we're focusing on on Talent Protocol is not kind of replacing LinkedIn with kind of a more verifiable, trustless version, but it's instead on adding additional information that you don't see on LinkedIn. So instead of, that's why on Talent Protocol you don't see information about jobs or education, because that's more or less already public and you can find that out for most people easily. So what we're focusing on is, okay, what can we add to the information that already exists? How can we complement this? So that's what we're focusing on, because we don't believe that this feature of making information verifiable is reason enough to kind of to convince people to change platforms. I think is a incremental improvement, is not like a 10x improvement that which it's what would require people to change. So what we're focusing on is, okay, how can we complement, how can we add more data to what already exists? And this is why I think we believe we're not a direct competitor, or we can be a complement to what LinkedIn is, because we just add that layer. But I think, of course, as things evolve, as more people come on chain, as more and more reputation data is on chain, I think Talent Protocol has the potential to become a bigger and bigger threat, so to speak, because then the more information you have on chain, the more I think recruiters will also rely on something like Talent Protocol to assess and find talent for their clients. So I think the ideal scenario in the coming months, years, is probably they're going to be using both tools. And but yeah, eventually there might come a time where, at least for some jobs, for some employers, the information that they can find on LinkedIn stops becoming useful. But I would say that this will be more focused on specific professions, for specific roles, because this is also how we're approaching things at Talent Protocol. So focusing on specific niches first, and then growing from there. So we focus now on chain builders, with a bigger focus on developers. And once we can be sure that we're a must-have tool for developers and not just a nice-to-have, and then we're certain that we have product market fit with this niche, we can start expanding to other niches. It's not that other people cannot use Talent Passport today, it's just that we're much more focused on getting data about on-chain builders' reputation than, for example, other types of jobs or content creators.
And why did you decide to focus on builders? Is it because that's an issue that we have to resolve as soon as possible, or what was like your rationale to choose this particular group of people?
I think there's two. There's like a more macro reason, which is, at least how we see it, crypto will only succeed if there's enough builders building innovative apps that kind of a mass market audience will use. So it's not just traders and degens that will make crypto grow and kind of and be successful long term. I think, of course, they are important, and they've been important so far. But I think for crypto to get to mass adoption status like we want, it's mainly the builders that will make the difference. It's the people that can build real world use cases and applications that non traders and people that care less about financial transactions can use. And we're far away from that. I think we have crypto. The Electric Capital kind of developer report just came out, and then there's roughly like 30,000 active developers on crypto. I mean, the ones that they can track, it can be a little bit more, but it still gives us a reference point. And and yeah, even assuming that they're missing a bunch of developers and other builders, this is still probably like a close to 1,000 times less than traditional Web2 developers. Just for us to have a comparison. So the main thing is that, okay, for us, for crypto to succeed, we need to be able to attract much more developers and more builders to the ecosystem to build the groundbreaking apps that we need. That's number one. Number two is that developers, it's easier to assess a developer's reputation based on data in kind of in a more automated way, because most of their work is already digital, so it's easier to verify than, for example, a manager. I mean, I don't know, you can be a very good CEO, but it's harder for me to find your reputation online, or find data, trackable data for that. So that's why I started with develops, and also because developers have probably the highest demand from a talent point of view. So from a recruiting, employment point of view, developers are probably the ones with the highest demand. So probably also the ones that can get us to like a sustainability kind of business model first.
No, I completely agree with it. While you were talking a little bit earlier about referrals, and while I was prepping for the interview, I was thinking that one of the major problems that we might have is that with the development of AI and the development of blockchain, we'll have these two amazing technologies where AI, you have all the data on chain, so it's immutable and it's verifiable. And then with that's with blockchain, and then with AI, you can easily go through all this data and rank it based on uh, the conditions that you put into your AI model. So do you think that some people might make the argument that obviously this entire this will like essentially dehumanize the entire process of hiring new people, because now before you even have an interview with another human being, you have to pass through this like multiple layers of approval. And how do you think that we can deal with it? And I guess it's not a question for Talent Protocol in particular, but how do you think we can deal with it? As I don't know.
I think that's a great question. And the first thing is that that's already a reality. So I think you're painting a future scenario where that exists, but that already exists. So there's already AI models going through resumes and kind of and sorting resumes. This already exists. So most of the resumes that you send to a job application are already sorted by an AI. So that the first stage of recruiting is already doing that. And I think what we argue here is that, okay, assuming that already exists and will continue to exist, and probably AI and kind of these automated systems will go even further. So maybe they'll do the first and the second screening, not just the first. So if in that scenario, we should have as much data as possible about someone, so that automated system has a better judgment, has more data. So AI it doesn't matter how smart it is, it just matters how much data he has about you. So if he just has your resume with your the schools you went to and the jobs that you had, I mean, it's going to be a very biased assessment. So I think that's one thing. So the more data we can collect, I think the fairer these models and assessments can be. The second one, which and I totally agree with kind of with your concern. The second one is that in Talent Protocol we're designing it to be like a combined approach. So of course this verifiable data that we can find online is super important to kind of to automate and do things at scale, and to make sure that people never need to kind of to fill out the form ever again, or kind of introduce their personal data time and time again. So most of the data is already online. We should just be able to grab it, fetch it, and show it. But we were combining these parts with a human layer. So again, hiring and kind of assessing someone's potential capabilities, it's always contextual and subjective. So in our protocol design, we are including that component. So that component of human reviews and human perception. Because again, your reputation is also not only what you've done and the facts that you can prove, but also what other people think of you, their perception of you, of how it was working with you. So we want to factor that in our protocol. So the how other people trust you and perceive you, and that's one. So people that know you and worked with you, how do they kind of um, do they endorse you or not? How do they trust you? And the second way of doing this, kind of having this human layer, is people like recruiters having the kind of a more manually curated review of people. Because for example, in the recruiter example, there's a lot of inefficiency. So a recruiter goes through, I don't know, 100, 200 candidates for a specific job. He then selects, I don't know, 5 to the short list, and then one is selected. All the work that they did, kind of reviewing, kind of all those 200 is candidates, is wasted. Maybe not wasted if they have their own database, but again, it's a private silo where they'll store that information about talent. What if this could be done in a more open and shared way, and every recruiter that's assessing a talent can actually, that information can be stored somehow and reused by others if they want to. So again, just coming back to your question, I think the solution to that problem is more data, and making sure that we have always a human layer to these automated systems.
Yeah, that's interesting. I, uh, I actually have a question about the recruiters, but you might not have an answer. So I think I would actually want to move on to the three main components of of your platform. And in my head, there are the talent passport, the reputation OT, and the ecosystem of apps. And then all these three are anchored by the token. So could you just run me? Actually, let's go through all those one by one, starting with the talent passport. What does that entail, and why do we need it to ensure that your system is operating in the most effective way?
Yes, so quickly explaining the three elements, you can think of Talent Passport as the consumer facing part of the protocol. So it's what is the app that users see, is what you what users see is your representation of your reputation in the form of a profile that we call passport, and where you can see a bunch of different credentials. And these credentials are an abstraction of your reputation data. So for example, one credential is about your GitHub data. So it kind of aggregates how many stars you have, the how long ago do you have that GitHub profile. So it kind of abstracts all of these data points into something that's much more readable and easier to understand for a human. And we also have what we call a builder score, since our focus for now is on-chain builders, and this builder score is a higher level of abstraction even, which is basically based on all the credentials that you own, the ones that you have. We calculate the score again to make it even easier for people to have like a first quick assessment of your capabilities as an on-chain builder. So this is the talent passport. And then kind of the what we call the reputation OS, so or you can think of it just as the core part of the protocol, which
Right,
is what run.
before we move to that, I
Okay.
know that your builder score is 170, or it was yesterday, unless
Yeah.
it increased overnight. But could you tell me a bit more about the builder score, and like what does it represent? How can you push that to 180? But also, what's the absolute limit, or is there a limit?
No, actually, we're announcing a few changes to the Builder Score today. So we launched the Talent Passport app and the Builder Score in mid March. So roughly 5 months ago. In the meantime, we've added a bunch of new integrations, new credentials. We've learned a lot. I mean, we grew from I think 250,000 passports to close to the 700,000 today. So that's almost three times as much. So we've learned a lot in these 5 months, and we're now releasing a kind of an update on kind of the scoring system, so the way we score. And I think the one of the major update and what I think is the most interesting part about the builder score is that we now divide the builder score into and the credentials into three categories. So there's the first category, which is identity credentials, and these are credentials that help prove that you're a human and help kind of separate real humans and real humans from duplicated accounts, from bots, from farmers. So basically, these type of, and this could be like a proof of humanity credential, like having World ID, or just kind of connecting your different social accounts and an email. So these are ways of you showing that you're a real person and you're not just um, a bot or a duplicated account. So this is kind of the identity layer, and there's other kind of solutions that do a similar job. For example, Gitcoin is one example. There are others that focus on this proof of humanity Sybil resistance problem. This is not what we're trying to solve. So what we're trying to solve is kind of, again, a new type of professional resume. It's like proving that you have real skills and capabilities. But to prove that you're a real builder, it's important to know that you're a human as well. So this is the base layer. The second layer, we call activity. So it's all credentials that can prove that show your activity online and can prove your kind of more general reputation as an on-chain user. So for example, all the transactions like that you did, like you mentioned in the beginning, other types of data that proves that you're a trusted actor, that you're a valuable member of like the Web3 community, and you're not like a farmer or someone just trying to capture value. And the third layer, which is the most important and the one that I don't think no one else is doing, and it's kind of where we add value and where we have differentiation, is like a kind of the skills, the capability, the builder. So what credentials, what data points show us that you're actually building things, that you're working and bringing value on chain as a builder or as a professional. So we have these three layers, and basically the builder score is a sum of all the credentials that you have, and of course each credential has a different weight or a different score. So for example, just having a LinkedIn profile doesn't count much. It probably gives you like 1 or 2 points to your builder score. But for example, if you deployed 100 smart contracts on base, that will probably count a lot of points because that's a very high signal that you're a builder. And basically this is how it works. So builder score is just a simple way for us to understand, okay, how likely is this person to be a real on-chain builder?
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you also used World ID to prove personhood and to ensure that everyone is a real person. And I was wondering, does your talent passport essentially works like a sovereign identity, like a self-sovereign identity, and could I use that and move it to another platform? Because let's say I build my score and I spend a lot of time working on it, would that mean that I'm locked on Talent Passport for the rest of my life, or could I just take all this data and deploy on another place in case that, let's say, I don't want to be on Talent Passport anymore for whatever reason? And I'm not saying that people would, a lot of people do it, but it's always good to have the freedom to do it. And it's something important to me as a Web3 native, and I assume that might be important for other people that are essentially investing time to build this portfolio.
Yeah, that's the goal. So Talent Protocol is open and permissionless in that sense. So we're actually also kind of deploying. So the passports are on chain, but not all credentials and builder score information is on chain yet. It will be as from now. It's also something that we're releasing this week. So yeah, answering your question, yeah, all of this information about your credentials and builder score and your passport and passport ID is on chain and owned by your wallet. And also the way that we're building Talent Protocol is to be as open as possible. And I think this touches on the other element that you referenced, the kind of the ecosystem apps. So the goal with Talent Protocol, again, is making this reputation data as open as and accessible as possible, because that's kind of the initial motivation. How can we make this accessible so that anyone can build a job board, a talent marketplace, and doesn't need to get all that data again themselves, because they can just tap into all the data that we already collected. And you can even think Talent Passport is just the first app, the first representation of all this data that was built and was built by the same team. But there are already dozens of other apps integrating with our data, and that's kind of our main goal, is to get, how can we get more people to adopt this data and to get this data into their products, to make their products better. I think the first use case that people are doing is integrating the builder score, which is easier. Okay, and for example, one base will launch, is launching in a couple of days their base names, which is their kind of domain, their own kind of namespace on base, where you'll have like a profile with all of history as a builder on base and etc. And one thing they integrated it was the builder score as well. So you have a bunch of things that you did on base and your builder score. So which means that this is an example of another app, another client that's using the builder score on their app. But this could be different, could be other app. Okay, I want to do again the job board, but I don't want to do all the profiles and all that again. I don't want to ask people to insert all of their professional information again. So they can just integrate with Talent Protocol, and they can have they can preload a profile for you just based on your wallet. So you can focus on doing the job board and the job matching, and you don't need to worry about building like all the profiles and getting people to add their information, because you can just tap into the Talent Protocol and that profile information that already exists.
No, that's super interesting and useful.
And in the future, also not only reading from that data, but also writing. So for example, if you have that jobs marketplace and you know that someone was hired for a job, you can write back to the protocol, okay, you can add this information about this person, that they were hired for this job.
Yeah, I think all those will be very interesting features and very useful. Yeah, I think we've exhausted that topic. So could we focus on the reputation OS now, and what does it do and how does it contribute to the entire ecosystem and help builders to essentially develop their score and their profile?
Yeah, so Reputation OS was basically the name that we gave, like the tech infrastructure that runs under the hood, and that makes these two things possible. That makes the Talent Passport use case possible, but also makes it open and accessible to all other apps that want to read and write data to it. So it's basically just the name that we gave all to the protocol design and all the tech. There's the protocol part, which is kind of the what's on chain. So basically, we when someone creates an account, we put it on chain that this wallet is the owner of this passport ID. They're the owner of that passport forever. Then we also put the credentials and the builder score, everything on chain. And there's the token part that we'll talk about in a second. That's also part of the on-chain part of the Reputation OS. But then there's also a off-chain component to it. So we have an API that makes it easier for these apps to kind of access this profile data, to access the builder score. They can either go fetch it on chain, or they can use our API to get a little bit more detail on their users and importing this data. But yeah, not getting too technical, I think Reputation OS is just that the what's happening under the hood to make it possible for the reputation data to be accessible to anyone anywhere.
Yeah, and I think another slightly philosophical question, like the previous one about AI and blockchain, um, I just feel that there is an inherent contradiction between every single individual person right to be forgotten, and blockchain, because the idea of blockchain is that something is on chain and it will be forever there, and your right as an individual to remain anonymous or synonymous or just disappear is kind of violated once you put your information on chain. So how do you think that we can deal with it? Because, and then also, do you have control over the profiles? Let's say, because I set up a profile, my builder score is 0 because I haven't done much yet. But and I'm no builder, but I was just really interested in how your protocol works. But the two essential questions here are: first of all, who controls my profile now? I know that, and I also haven't linked it to my any of my wallets. I set it up with my email, but also like, can I delete if I link it to my wallet? Can I delete it? And if I delete it, would that eradicate all the data that I've provided? How would that work? Because once it's on chain, would I be able to delete my profile and be like, I don't want anyone to know who I am?
Yes, I think that's a great question, and of course, blockchain makes it, I think, a sensitive topic. But most of those problems already happen today. Although you can ask some platforms to delete your data, just the trouble that you need to go through to delete all your data and all these different like private wall gardens is already a mess. And I can even argue that in blockchain, although it's immutable, I think there's ways in which, and I can talk about the Talon protocol use case in a second, but I think there's ways in which, since the data is aggregated, it's would probably be easier for you to say, okay, I don't want to show this data anymore. In our case, I think that this is possible for two reasons. First of all, we don't put all data, or better yet, first of all, most of the data that you'll see on your talent passport is basically an aggregation of data that already exists on chain. So you already created an account with your email. The next step would be connecting a wallet and, for example, your LinkedIn account, and this starts populating your talent passport. But if you disconnect those accounts, you'll go back to zero, and you'll use those credentials. So basically, what we're doing is that you're giving access to the passport by connecting with your wallet. You're giving access, and you're connecting the passport with all the reputation data that you already have in your wallet, that you already have on chain. There's some things that we try to add, but most of the things will be based on aggregation and then inferring stuff, or inferring more reputation data, just because we have all of this together. So most of the data in your passport is already on chain. We're not putting anything new on chain. What we're putting on chain is like this abstraction of the credentials and the score. And the credentials, the score is a separate contract, but credentials are attestations, which can be updated, which means that if you decide, okay, I don't want to show this and this credential anymore, and there's a little toggle on the passport that allows you to ignore this credential, ignore a specific credential, we just update that attestation with the new information. So basically, in this case, if you want to erase your credentials and score from the blockchain, you can, because we can just update the credential and empty your passport, so to speak. And you can also delete your account from Talent Passport. An interesting thing that we have on the roadmap to explore is ZK proofs and ZK technology as a way for you to, so it's a kind of different use case, but it's a way for you to only reveal your reputation data to the entities that you wish to, and for a determined or a predetermined amount of time. So you can still own them, you can still keep them on your passport, but they are private. And you, for example, you might want to show them to a potential employer during your recruiting stage, but once the recruiting period ends, you can revoke their access to your private reputation data. But I think, although this is interesting, again, for most people, I don't think this is a nice to have, not a must have. And especially the niche that we're focusing on, I think people are mostly happy and want to have as many reputation data points publicly as possible. But still, I think it's an interesting feature and technology to explore.
Yeah, 100%. I'm very bullish on ZK as technology, and I'm looking forward to a lot more companies to implement it. What do you think would be the time frame? And I don't want you to commit to anything right now, but because obviously you're considering it, how long do you think it would take for you or any other company to implement something as complex and challenging as ZK? Because it's a comparatively new technology, even though we've been talking about it for some time now.
It's a good question. It's not in our short-term roadmap, and mostly because we didn't yet see demand for it. Although there's people, we've talked about it, and again, I think this is interesting from a technological point of view and from an innovation point of view. It's interesting for this to exist and for someone to be exploring this use case of my reputation data being private and I control who has access to it. But we don't see demand for it from a user perspective, neither from the talent perspective or the employer. So from the interviews that we did and all that research, it's not a top priority. There are many more things which are important to people, and it's usually the opposite. So it's much more, when you talk with users, it's much more, okay, how can you get more of my reputation in my passport? Could you integrate with this and this? Could you integrate with these platforms that you don't yet? People saying, okay, I have a lot of interesting data here, can you integrate this? So I think the requests are much more, how can we put more data on chain? How can we show more, and not how can we hide more?
Okay, that's interesting. What would you say are the top three requests from users? Because I don't know, I've always been the main reason that I joined the entire ecosystem is because of Bitcoin and how it gives you the privacy, and it's been a very important component for me. But I know the people don't normally care about it. So what do you think the majority of users care about?
Uh, there's a lot of things. There's, first of all, probably the most requested is um, like Quest platforms like Layer 3 or Galaxy, etc. But we don't actually believe these should be a priority, because first of all, why are people asking for this ones? Because it's places where they have data, where they have reputation, and a lot of these people are still kind of entering the space. They're probably trying to look for their first job, so they're looking, okay, this is where I already have reputation, this is what would allow me to get my builder score a little bit up. So this is usually the main request, and I think it can be interesting to have in that activity layer that I mentioned. So I think it allows you or shows how active, how engaged someone is with the blockchain and the crypto ecosystem as a whole. Uh, but not so much from like a capabilities or skills perspective. I think other interesting requests is from non-developer professionals. So from designers, from marketeers, um, uh, people that work in community, uh, all of those also request, okay, so how can we have more credentials that showcase my reputation? And I'm not a developer, so I don't have smart contracts, I don't have a GitHub, so how could you show my reputation? That's also a common request, and I think it's a bit more challenging to understand. Again, for those people, there's even less data online that we can try to get. So I think it will have to rely a little bit more on like the human side of things and kind of how much do people that they've worked with trust them. And yeah, and I think the last one, which is kind of our priority at the moment, is how can we go deeper in our GitHub integration, because the main request from like the employer side of from the people looking for talent, one of the main requests that we can already solve is matching GitHub accounts with wallet addresses. There's a lot of people that have information, for example, networks like Base or Optimism or etc. They know all the wallet addresses that are the most active developers. They know who's deploying smart contracts, what addresses, but they don't know what person this address is, because most of the times developers use a bunch of different addresses to deploy smart contracts. So I know, okay, this address is deploying a lot of smart contracts with a lot of activity in our network, but I have no idea who they are. And on the other hand, you can do it in another way, which is just identifying popular and kind of well-known repos of crypto projects and understanding, okay, these are the GitHub accounts that have contributed more for this repos. These are people that have been valuable, but then you don't know who they are on chain. What's their wallet address? What's their ENS? And I think one benefit of the Talent Passport is that we're seeing kind of very short term is bringing these two together. So we know a GitHub account, which wallet addresses do they own? Again, because there's this incentive for you to connect as many wallets as you can so that your builder score goes higher and higher. And yeah, so now what people are asking is for us to get more data from GitHub, because for example, there's very experienced developers that are just entering Web3. They might have deployed a few smart contracts, but not that much, so their builder score is not that high. But they might have like 20 years of experience in Web2 and have a GitHub filled with interesting projects and data, and we're not getting all of that data yet. So I think that's one of our priorities now, is making sure that at least for developers, we have a very accurate assessment of their reputation and capabilities.
No, thank you so much. That was super useful. And apologies for turning off my camera. I had to just quickly go for my charger because my laptop was going to die. So I was like, oh my days, where's my charger? I have to quickly get it. Could you explain the function of GitHub and why that's so important for developers, but also for you, by extent, and how it works for the listeners and viewers that are not familiar with it?
So first, why is GitHub so important for us? Because basically GitHub is the main tool most developers use on their day-to-day. So it's where, as opposed to, for example, a designer that might have like a Behance or Dribble profile, and I upload my projects there after I work. I think GitHub, the main advantage is that it's part of the workflow. So when I'm doing code for a project, developers actually use GitHub as a way to commit and to kind of to deliver that code. So they use GitHub as a way to deliver and kind of upload the code online. So since it's part of the workflow, they don't need to go after they end the project. They don't need to go there and put the project. So it's less like a portfolio, and it's much more like the tool that you use to work. So all of your work history and your work data is automatically on GitHub. So that's why it's so rich and so interesting, because developers don't need to do anything besides working to have the work history online. And that's why it's so interesting for us, and why we're starting with developers in the Talent Passport, because all of their work history is already online. We just need to make sense of it and bring it on chain. That's what we're doing. Of course, a GitHub profile shouldn't be the only thing that we count for developer, and there are some ways in which people can game some of the metrics on GitHub, but still, I think it's a very high signal and accurate source that we can rely on.
Yeah, and you launched V2 in March this year. So could you tell me what were the main updates and features that you added, and how is it different? Do you think that you will change something in the next 6 to 12 months? And what's on the roadmap for you? It's more of a give me the beginning of it, and then where is it going?
Yeah, so we talked a lot about the present. I can give a brief mention about the past and the future. So I think starting with the past, I think most of what we talked about today is came with the V2. So a lot of these things didn't exist before March. So because the way or the initial idea for Talent Protocol again was still about, okay, how can we bring how can we make someone's reputation more visible. The approach was a bit different. So the approach was much more focused on the social side of it. So like we talked about the human aspect of it, because the initial idea of Talent Protocol was allowing people to create a token for themselves and for their career. So imagine you can have your career token, and other people could basically buy that token. And it was a staking mechanism, so it wasn't like a very volatile or kind of or speculative instrument. So it was mainly I could stake on you and get some of your tokens as a way to show that I trust you, that I endorse you, that I believe in your potential. So that was the main mechanism that we're focusing on. So all of this that we talked about aggregating existing data and all this kind of hard side of the reputation, the this didn't exist before. So what we realized is that, okay, this social component is important, but we already have so much data online and on chain that we can use as a starting point. And that was kind of the pivot, focusing more on the data that exists. And then we've still been doing some experiments in kind of in the social side, but that's what we used the Farcaster for a bit as well. So trying to use or kind of read the existing social graphs and trust graphs that people already have and try to get information from that. But yeah, that was the main pivot from V1 to V2, was going from just a professional reputation platform focused on social trust and social graph to one that has a lot more types of data and it's a lot more accurate. Now, I think going forward, one thing I already mentioned, which is focusing a lot more on developers, and especially on base developers. If you want to ask what's the niche, the most important niche is developers on base, because I think in the past 5 months since we launched the V2, the focus has been broader. Although kind of builders and developers are more or less at the core, it wasn't a very we weren't that focused. Okay, so we have some credentials that are meant for artists, for creators. We try to onboard as many different people as possible, also to get different perspectives, etc. So I would say that was these 5 months. Okay, let's launch V2. Let's get as many people as possible in here. Let's get feedback from all types of professional backgrounds. And now moving forward, we're focusing a lot on base developers and then expanding from there. So going probably from base developers to superchain developers, from superchain developers probably to on-chain developers, then maybe adding other kind of types of builders like designers, writers, still focusing on on-chain. But yeah, that's more or less the plan. In terms of features, probably there's two things we're focusing on also. One is monetization / business model. So until now, this is basically free for everyone, and now in the coming months we're exploring ways that we can bring some revenue in and make the project more sustainable. And especially this revenue will come from the demand side, so from people recruiting, people looking for talent, because they are the ones kind of that already have a budget for this and they are already spending money elsewhere. And the second one is launching the token. So the token is a core component of how the protocol works. we've been we've tried to we know how a token can kind of introduce some or kind of refocus your attention on markets and the token itself. And so we want to make sure that we have product market fit, that we know exactly what our problem our product is solving, and how the token will integrate into the product. Of course, we always design the protocol with the token in mind, and it has a very important role, especially for that human layer of kind of how do we get a lot of people to review profiles, to introduce this human layer of reputation data. And there needs to be incentives and slashing mechanisms to make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to do. But we won't only want to introduce it when we're really sure that we're at the right place, to make sure that it doesn't kind of misguide us into a different path. But yeah, that's probably coming soon, because now we're already kind of we need the token to kind of to evolve to the next product stages that we want and that we need.
Could you elaborate a bit on the utility of the token? Because a question that I always ask myself is, why do you need a token? And if you don't have a good enough reason, could you just use an existing token? But yeah, also you're build on base. So could you just tell me a bit more about why on base? Like, what was the rationale behind using base in particular?
Okay, starting with the token first. I completely agree with your question, and this is a question we ask ourselves a lot. There were even like some use cases that we had thought for the token that we kind of dropped, exactly because we realized, okay, this is actually easier if you do it with an existing token than introducing a new token. And two examples that we're probably doing soon is one is already to be launched in the next days, which is that idea of putting your information on chain. For you to put your information on chain, and if you want to update it more regularly than what's scheduled, you will need to pay a small amount. But again, using our token, it's much easier if you pay in ETH than using our own token. The other one is similar to the model that we have in the beginning of Talent Protocol, that you can stake on someone as a way to show your trust or your endorsement. Again, this is something that we thought of using our own Talent token, but again, makes more sense using a common currency as well. Where we really need a token, and where the token is really useful, is to govern how the protocol works, meaning what data do we deem interesting and valuable, and what is not. Because basically what Talent Protocol is doing is making that decision. Okay, what data can help us understand someone's reputation, and how valuable is that data. So for example, in our case, we're doing builders, we have a builder score. So we are deciding, now we, the core team, are deciding, okay, we should look into GitHub, we should look into smart contracts, and this is data that's relevant to put on the passport. But we're also discarding a lot of other data points that we don't think are valuable. And in a kind of decentralized and open protocol, this shouldn't be a decision made by a handful of people. So the main goal of the token is, one, deciding, okay, what data points, what credentials should exist, and how much should they count for the builder score. And this, in a more decentralized stage, is not only deciding, but it can also be contributing. So for example, if you can stake some talent, and you can add directly a credential to the protocol. You can code your own credential that grabs some data, and you can add it to the protocol. But for this to happen, you probably need a stake of talent to make sure that you're not adding a credential that's destroying value or etc. And there can be a mechanism also to vote which credentials to be introduced in a following release. So that's one part of it. The other part about kind of is helping. The other part in which the token is useful is helping um, the protocol to have valuable and updated data. That's another issue that happens with LinkedIn, for example, is that people only update their LinkedIn profile when they're looking for a job. So probably if I have a job for 2 years, it means that my LinkedIn will be the same during 2 years. That's just kind of an anecdote as an example, but to keep the data updated and healthy and reliable for other people to other apps to use it, there needs to be mechanisms in place to guarantee that. And a protocol token helps incentivize firstly the users themselves, so incentivize you to make sure that your data is trustworthy and valuable, because it rewards you a little bit if it is, or penalizes if it doesn't, and can also allow for that layer of people reviewing profiles that we talked about. So imagine that you're a recruiter, you're already reviewing profiles for your job. If you add that information to Talent Protocol and you're adding value, you're making the data about the person richer, you can also get some rewards for that. And yeah, and kind of what feeds kind of this cycle, this reward distribution is money coming into the system. So people searching for talent, people wanting to recruit talent. So this is where a token is, I think, needed. So to keep the data healthy and working, and to make sure that is governed the right way, you need to basically pay for people that are adding value to the system, and for that we need a token that we can control and emit.
And could you explain to me? So my understanding of it is that there are two reasons for you to launch your own token. One of them is the voting power and staking, and the second one is to have a mechanism to ensure that the data on the protocol is regularly updated. So could you just explain why do you need your native token and why this can't be done with like an existing token?
Yes, I think that that's a good summary. It's all related to data, but I think on one layer people are governing kind of the data types or the credential, and the other layer it's incentivizing the people to update and connect more data sources to their profile. And the main reason to have the own token is the ability to reward people. So if it was just kind of, I think, money coming in, or people kind of staking as a way to for them to behave the right way, we could use another token. But since the goal is, okay, there's money coming in from people that want to write to the protocol, or recruiters, or people that are searching and want to access a lot of data, so there's value coming in, but we need to distribute it to people. It's a little bit like I don't even like Ethereum works. So they need to emit new tokens and distribute new tokens to validators as a way to reward them for their work. And in this case, it's the same thing. We need to reward the people that are adding value to the protocol, and adding value can be, for example, if you create a new credential that has a lot of demand and a lot of people use and a lot of people want to search for, you should be rewarded for this. So all these kind of cycles of pay, stake, reward are much easier to design if it's a token that you control, and a token that you can emit, than if you're using someone else's currency.
Yeah, my understanding is that if you're using someone else's currency, you would essentially need to purchase that token to be able to reward the third party. But if you have your own token, then you reward them with something that you've created, so you have a bit more control over the entire reward mechanism, which is like a good argument to make, in my opinion. And my